Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening and welcome to 2024 elections. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. And today we have a very, very special guest because we're going to be reflecting on 30 years of democracy, the progress the country has made, what more needs to be done, the challenges facing within the country as we move very closer towards that May 29 polls. And it gives me great pleasure in welcoming the former president of our Republic of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe. Mr. President, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal
Good
TV.
evening, Faraz, and good evening to Hilaal viewers.
Yes.
Yes.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here,
Thank
of course,
you.
hosting a first head of state. So the honor is really ours. Mr. President, looking at 30 years of democracy, and you were there, you saw the signing of the Constitution, you were there earlier in this year, earlier in this month, 30 years ago, when former President Nelson Mandela was inaugurated. How far have we as a nation come in terms of our very young democracy?
Well, we may not be where we want to be, but we certainly are far away from where we were in 1994. So we've really made lots of progress. We've moved, but we are not yet where we want to be. Yeah.
Mr. President, we've seen the euphoria of Madiba, and of course you were there as part of, the ANC leadership, and it was a beautiful moment. And sports, you always loved the sports. Did later Tata Mandela, you yourself also love your sports. You're telling me, off air about your love for football. That euphoria, when we look at the Rugby World Cup, the signing of the Constitution, the Africa Cup of Nations, and just these moments that made us proud to be South African. How do we reinvigorate that in today's society in our country?
Well, the first point is really to appreciate and understand that that was a foundation, and that you build on a solid foundation. So to reinvigorate that spirit of, the confidence to make progress and to build this non-racial, democratic, united nation of South Africa. It takes quite some effort. And all we need to do, as you alluded to, sports has that capacity to unite people. And so we've got to attend to issues of the land question. Sure. We need to attend to issues of bulk infrastructure, education, health system. Education is one area where we need to invest, because you need to build an economy, you need the requisite skills. So the more we invest in education, in terms of skills training, so your TVET colleges are very important to produce the skills that are needed by the economy.
Mr. President, the Constitution, which was of course signed 28 years ago, was such a historic moment because it finally saw us come out of close to 400 years of colonialism and apartheid. You were there, with the likes of President Nelson Mandela, Judge L.B. Sachs, and so many great individuals. What did it mean for South Africa at that time, at that moment, that our Constitution's being written and it's being implemented so that we, as a country that went through so many years of hardship and pain, can finally enjoy the fruits of freedom?
Well, the Constitution was a very important supreme law of the new nation we were trying to construct. And it marked a break, a complete break with the past, because remember, we come from parliamentary democracy, so-called because it was a parliament for whites only, excluded the rest of us. And yet, because it was parliamentary democracy, so if the security police needed to detain people without trial, they just inform Parliament, and Parliament passes a law. So Parliament passes a law which allows them to detain people for 90 days and hold them incommunicado. So they could torture you and extract whatever information they needed and give you time to heal. By the time you appear in a court of law, there's not a scratch that it can be used as evidence that you've gone through a torture period. And then later they increased it to 180 days. Yeah. So we have a very bitter experience of parliamentary democracy. And that's why now we have a constitutional democracy, which means the Constitutional Court is the apex court of the land, and all laws passed must find approval and certification by the Constitutional Court. So that in itself is a great, checks and balance in the architecture of our democracy. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land here.
Mr. President, before we go to the break, I want to spend some time talking about what's currently happening in Gaza. We were both watching South Africa present additional measures at the ICJ. And if there's one thing each and every president since Mandela right up until President Cyril Ramaphosa has advocated, the freedom of the people of Palestine. How important is that solidarity that South Africa has had? How important was the solidarity that the African National Congress has had to the people and the liberation of Palestine?
Well, the guiding principle is that you must have the ability to feel the pain that is visited upon any people anywhere in the world. And so it is not possible for democratic South Africans to watch on television the brutalities, the ravages of, that the Palestinian people are subjected to. In fact, Palestine, is made up of two parts, which are not contiguous because they've been separated. So you have Gaza as an enclave, which has been under blockade for decades. And then you have the West Bank, which is also under occupation. So there are checkpoints within the West Bank itself, where there's a wall that is being constructed, which separates the Jewish settlements. Jewish settlements have been, constructed within the West Bank, and Palestinians who are the rightful owners of that part of Palestine are uprooted. Old olive troves that their grandfathers, planted and cultivated, are being uprooted to create space for Jewish settlements. Many people think only Gaza is under siege, but the West Bank, the Jewish communities within the West Bank have also killed a number of Palestinians, as it were. So that's an injustice, and it is in our DNA as democratic South Africa that we must be on the side of the victims of injustice anywhere in the world.
And Mr. President, you would know best because you were underground. You understand what the meaning of liberation and freedom is. And we look at what happened, of course, on December 29th last year when when South Africa launched this application at the ICJ against Israel. It takes one liberation movement to know another. It takes one pain to know another. How much of that moral high ground has South Africa got in terms of what it is doing now in the ICJ in bringing the perpetrators of the genocide to book?
Well, you know, there's a Genocide Convention. And all what South Africa has done is to invoke that convention, that it is applicable in the situation that is unfolding in Gaza. And of course, that was dismissed by the Americans, was dismissed by the supporters of Israel, even here at home, as something that is frivolous, baseless, in spite of the fact that every day people witness these attacks and brutal, you know, displacements of families. I mean, all the universities in the Gaza are now destroyed. The hospitals are now destroyed. And remember, Gaza itself is actually an amalgam of refugee camps. Yes. These are people who were basically displaced as way back as 1948. And there's a law of return, right of return, which says any Jewish person anywhere in the world is a citizen of Israel, but no Palestinian has a right of return. Yeah.
After the break, I continue my conversation with former President Motlanthe. We're going to be looking ahead to this year's elections. Do stay tuned to 2024 elections. Welcome back to 2024 elections. My name is Faraz Patel. I'm in conversation with former President Kgalema Motlanthe. Mr. President, this year's elections, how important is it that the citizens of South Africa make use of the beauty of our democracy to cast their vote in the ballot?
Well, this year's elections are, in a sense, unique because the Concord handed down a judgment which allows for independents to contest both provincial and national elections, whereas in the past the Electoral Act only allowed a hybrid system of proportional representation and constituency-based elections at local government level. The provincial and national levels were always based on proportional representation. But this year, there's this element of independents also being allowed to contest elections at that level. And of course, there's a proliferation of, you know, political parties that have received funding from the captains of industry who believe that the African National Congress should be, you know, factored out of governance going forward. And so they've sponsored all these political parties with the sole aim of getting them to eat away at the support base of the African National Congress. And of course, you know, the narrative also is controlled by the national narrative that is by the same people. And so they issue poll results from time to time.
Are you buying the poll results, Mr. President, that say
well,
the ANC is going to lose majority?
Well, the point is poll results measure sentiment at a particular time. And it also depends on the size of the sample community. It depends on the question posed, so that, you know, the results are based on the response from those who were interviewed. Now, these poll results are presented as though they are predictions. They are not predictions. Yeah. No, they can never be predictions. They measure sentiment of the sample population. And so, for instance, if you were to ask people who have no electricity whatsoever, and or are experiencing complete blackout, what they think about the government, they would give you a negative response. But 2 weeks down the line, if they are properly connected, the electricity supply is uninterrupted, they'll give a different response. So it's a sentiment at a particular point in time. Yeah.
President Motlanthe, in '94, the ANC were the chasers. I'm going to use a football phrase. You're chasing that title. Now the ANC is in defense of its title. You've been doing campaigning across various townships in South Africa. And I've watched the campaigning, and it's always a mixed feeling. There's people that are warmly embracing the ANC. There's people that are saying, look, you have not done enough. What does the ANC need to do to try and say we're still the party of choice for the majority of this nation and the rest of the country?
Well, there's no substitute for direct voter contact, because the voters do not only have, concerns or complaints or demands, they also have suggestions. They're also willing to accept if they are given, logical, cogent explanations, and if they are armed with information as to how their immediate demands are going to be addressed. They accept and understand, the rationale and reasoning once provided. The problem is if there's no direct contact, if there's no channels, and the only experience of people is negative, of course they remain negative. They generate negative energy. But once they are engaged and feel that they are taken seriously, they generate positive energy.
Mr. President, your successor, former President Jacob Zuma, of course, is now part of the MK party, but as we speak, he's still a member of the ANC, pending, of course, the disciplinary hearing that's going to happen after the elections. Are you slightly disappointed in the way this has all turned out, given former President Zuma's history within the ANC and, of course, being in the underground movement and really being part and parcel of the party flourishing in the democracy that we have now?
Well, for starters, I mean, the ANC constitution is very clear that it is an offense for any member to belong to any other party other than a party that is in alliance with the ANC. Yeah. So once you locate yourself in any other party outside of those that are in alliance with the ANC, in terms of the ANC constitution, you've defined yourself outside of its membership. Put simply, you've expelled yourself. So it's, and of course, I've said before that, each one of us writes their own history through the choices that you make every day of your existence. So President Zuma has made his choice, and that's who he is here.
Mr. President, I spoke to Matthew Sposa, who was, of course, the ANC Treasurer General and somebody you know quite well, and he said 30 years is not enough for the ANC to put South Africa as or near to a developed nation. President Cyril Ramaphosa has had 6 years so far as his tenure as president, and He came in, of course, with a very heightened expectation given the stature of leader that he is. Load shedding had obviously at the time went to stage 6, which is not desirable. We haven't had load shedding now for over close to 1.5 months.
Yeah.
Energy availability factor sitting at 70, but there are various other challenges. For example, the strengthening of the criminal justice system. What would be your selling point to the citizens that the ANC deserves that next term?
Well, a whole range of different things. I mean, children of very indigent families go to school and they receive one nutritious meal per day. And once they go through high school and they go to tertiary, there's NSFAS, which takes care of the costs so that they can acquire education. That in itself is a major benefit to South African citizens. So in a way, I mean, building is a process, and the important point is that we are not building on ashes. We are building on solid foundation, and so if there's to be continuity, and in a re-energized manner, the ANC does deserve to be given one more chance, because those who have no track record, those who have not, led any government anywhere, are still going to go through a steep learning curve, and 5 years is a very short period. So I would say, I mean, the 30 years is barely enough to lay down a foundation, to give indicators as to which direction the country and the economy is taking. So you need far more than that. But we must understand that to the indigent, to someone who has nothing, the kinds of people that the late Martin Luther King Jr. described as people who suffer from the degenerating feeling of nobodiness. You can't say to those kinds of people, be patient. They have the right to be impatient. Yes.
I got one final question, Mr. President. Coalition governments looks like it's potentially going to happen. Of course, the ANC would like to have the majority. If we are to go into coalition governments, you, of course, head the elections committee within the ANC. What are the T's and C's that the ANC is looking at in order to run an efficient coalition government on a national level?
Well, the first point to make is that even if the ANC were to get 50 plus 1%, and therefore the right to govern on its own, if there's any other party which may have garnered 20% or more votes, it would be advisable for the ANC to go into a coalition with such a party. I'll tell you why. Because then you would have a government that enjoys support of 80% of the electorate. And that in itself means that that government can address the most difficult issues without, fear of being undermined. But if you simply say, we will go it alone because we've got 50 plus 1%, because you got to understand that to move this country forward, you need to tap into the best available talent in the country. And so if you have the requisite mandate of a larger percentage of the population, then you've got, the mandate to actually tackle difficult questions here.
Mr. Former President, thank you so much for joining us here
Thank
on Elections 2024. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's former President of the
Thank you.
Republic of South Africa, Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, joining us here on 2024 elections. For myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Jazakallah so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.